obviously there's anti-trans laws happening all around the country, and I believe there was even one in Alabama that ended up being stopped by a similar action by the Department of Justice. Biden's Department of Justice has decided to start stepping in some of these situations where gender-affirming care is being restricted from minors. So we have Tennessee, in this specific instance, has, I believe, passed a law last year that bans medically necessary care for trans kids. And the Department of Justice is taking action against them. This is the press release from the DOJ, and I am heartened by how strongly written this letter is. I am less heartened by what I think is going to eventually happen, but we will not get to the part where I'm pessimistic just yet. Justice Department challenges Tennessee law that bans critical, medically necessary care for transgender youth. This is from the Department of Justice. So I guess it's good that at the officially, like, the federal level of Department of Justice, they are saying trans healthcare is medically necessary and critical for trans youth. So the Department of Justice today has filed a complaint challenging Tennessee Senate Bill 1. It's such a bummer. Senate Bill 1. That means that the very first thing that the Tennessee legislature did when they convened to session to start passing bills to help their constituents, the very first thing that they did was limit the rights of trans youth. Disgusting. This recently enacted law that denies necessary medical care to youth based solely on who they are. The complaint alleges that SB 1's ban on providing medically necessary care to trans minors violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. So we are arguing for this under the 14th Amendment. It's like equal protection under the law. You can't approve testosterone therapy for low testosterone cisgender men and not provide testosterone care in the same type of gender affirming sense to transgender men. Like, you can't treat different groups differently under the law. That's like what the Equal Protection Clause is. You're supposed to treat everybody the same under the law. So yeah, if you wouldn't deny that gender affirming care to a cis person, you can't deny it to a trans person. So puberty blockers, I think, are one of the main ways that we can identify equal protection issues, is that you will give puberty blockers to teens who are experiencing, or kids who are experiencing precocious puberty, cisgender kids for whom you want them to have a certain type of development. But and then you, on the other hand, try to deny them to transgender kids because of their status as transgender. So we're kind of getting to this question in the law of whether being transgender is a protected class. Like, I think that that's fundamentally what this is going to come down to. And like, whether this counts as treating them different under the law based on that characteristic, you know? So yeah, the complaint alleges that this violates the equal protection laws by discriminating on both the basis of sex and transgender status. Doctors, parents, and anyone else who provides or offers this care faces the possibility of civil suits for 30 years and other sanctions. Just describing some of the punishments that Tennessee has proposed for transgressing on this law. No person should be denied access to medically necessary care just because of their transgender status, said Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark of the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. She says, the right to consider your health and medically approved treatment options with your family and doctors is a right that everyone should have, including transgender children who are especially vulnerable to serious risks of depression, anxiety, and suicide. The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department will continue to aggressively challenge all forms of discrimination and unlawful barriers faced by the LGBTQI+ community. U.S. Attorney Henry Leventis for the Middle District of Tennessee says SB 1 violates the constitutional rights of some of Tennessee's most vulnerable citizens. Left unchallenged, it would prohibit trans children from receiving health care that their medical providers and their parents have determined to be medically necessary. In doing so, the law seeks to substitute the judgment of trained medical professionals and parents with that of elected officials and codifies discrimination against children who already face far too many obstacles. I believe that the Middle District of Tennessee is where this suit has been filed. Looking over here at the actual suit, you know, we have some children and their parents suing the state of Tennessee and the United States of America. Yeah, like this is the actual Department of Justice is representing these families in a civil rights case, is essentially what this is kicking off. So This is filed in the Middle District of Tennessee, which covers, I believe, covers Nashville. And like the defendants are the Attorney General, Tennessee Department of Health, Board of Medicine. Yeah, like a bunch of people are called as defendants in this case. This lawsuit challenges a state statute denying medically necessary care to children based on who they are. All people, including trans youth, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect under the 14th Amendment. The United States accordingly files this complaint and intervention to enforce the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection, challenging certain provisions. While prohibiting certain forms of medically necessary gender-affirming care for transgender minors, SB 1 permits all other minors to access the same procedures and treatments. For example, SB 1 accepts the same medical procedures when they are used to, quote, treat a minor's congenital defect, precocious puberty, disease, or physical injury. So all of those times that these bills have written in exceptions, you're allowed to do these hormone blockers and cross-sex hormones and even genital surgeries on minors if they are intersex. You're allowed to perform sterilizing procedures on minors so long as they're intersex. That's allowed. So that's the basis by which they're doing this 14th Amendment thing. You're creating carve-outs, exceptions for precocious puberty, congenital defects, disease, or physical injury. You know, you're allowed to treat these other issues with this same type of medical care, but you're disallowing it for trans people specifically. So that's kind of the basis by which they're running with this. SB 1's ban on various forms of medically necessary care only for transgender minors with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria discriminates on the basis of both sex and transgender status in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It's these exceptions that made me realize they know exactly what they're doing. Of course, they want to normalize like people in a binary system. You know, you want to have males and females and that's it. And no exceptions and no middle ground. It's okay to normalize intersex genitals, but it's not okay to like have trans people transgress, because the goal there is, yes, for everybody to be normative. So here are my concerns about this. My concern is that this is the part that I struggle with a little bit, like figuring out exactly what's going to happen. Where is this being filed? How long is it going to take this to get appealed upwards? So my concern with this is I think this is what's going to happen with this lawsuit. You know, DOJ sues Tennessee. What's going to happen is it's starting in the Middle District of Tennessee, Nashville Division. So it's starting in one of the court systems within Tennessee. And what I believe is going to happen is that they're going to continue to appeal this up and up and up and up and up until it gets to the Supreme Court. You know, it's either like what's likely to happen is that in some of these lower courts, the United States government is going to win. They're going to be able to successfully argue that this goes against the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. I think that the defendants are going to then appeal it upwards and say, well, we don't agree with this court's decision, so we want to appeal. And then it'll go up next to the local, like the appeals court that Tennessee is part of the district of. And then eventually it'll make its way to the Supreme Court. This is just a prediction. And I might not be correct. What I want to happen, what I hope happens, I'm not optimistic that it will happen, but what I hope happens is that this just gets dropped after this. Like, I hope what happens is this is a very clear-cut case of equal protection, and that precedent will then stand for them to say, okay, well, in all other places in the country, this can't be done. But I believe what's going to happen is maybe not with this one, maybe with a different one. Maybe, yeah, it might not be this case, but what I believe is going to happen is eventually one of these cases where the Department of Justice or someone is suing one of these state governments, like First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, whichever one it is, they're going to appeal it up to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court is like clearly has been stacked by Republicans repeatedly and is a conservative partisan court now. We're probably going to lose our rights on a bigger basis. Like that's my humble opinion, is I actually I'm like not psyched about the idea of this going up to the Supreme Court, because I think what's going to happen is we are going to lose our rights on a more broad level with all of these like Trump appointed justices, other Republican appointed justices, That's my, I guess, sort of pessimistic view on what's going to occur here. It's like I almost don't want this kind of lawsuit to happen because this Supreme Court is not going to be on board with us. Like maybe the swing vote. What's the name on the swing vote? Who is he? What's the name? We do have one guy on the Supreme Court who does sometimes, like, on a strict constitutional letter of the law kind of situation. Maybe if you're able to demonstrate that it's like a truly an equal protection thing, you know, I'm assuming that the DOJ lawyers are going to do their best. And I hope that they do their best, and I hope that they succeed, and that this establishes precedent that can be used far and wide across the country to say, you know, you're not allowed to discriminate against trans people and put all these barriers in the way of their care. We can hope at least. It's gonna be May. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters. I want to especially shout out this month Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Danielle McDonald, Amanda B, Athiette, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Sarah A, Wellington Marcus, Michelle Winter, Desi Quiche, Jamie Jam, Suzanne Maynard, Mr. Atheist, Elizabeth Bartell, Kevin Young, Nova, and Sojo.